Hi, Francis. I'm going to try to make that very simple. When my father passed away, I saw him when he was dead. Well, I mean, I saw him after 2 days that he was dead. You know, he came to me. Then, when a cat that I liked died, which I even did not know he died, you know, it came to me also. You know, I don't know when, let's say 2 days after that. So my question is, does that, I know you said last time that...
What do you mean it came to me?
Well, I just saw the cat was with me, actually even was in Iowa when the cat used to live here in Temecula, you know, and I thought the cat was there and I tripped over the cat, but the cat, of course, and then I received an email saying that the cat is dead.
I still don't understand what you mean by the cat came to me, I'm sorry.
I just saw the cat visit me after he's dead. But I did not know he was dead. I received an email saying, okay, the cat is dead. So anyway, my question is...
So you saw it in a dream or you saw it?
No, I came back from work and I tripped over the cat because the cat was there, you know, and so I said, hey, Kiddy.
It was Schrodinger's cat because it could be in 2 locations. No, with a probability of being in Temecula and another probability to be in Idaho. Yeah. That could help. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so my question is, anyway, it seemed that it's possible that when an object, a person, someone alive, die, it seemed, in my case, I can say, yes, it seems that after they are dead, you can still see them at least once. You know, and so my question is, so I know consciousness can play this role, can do anything, everything is possible, but from that, my point of view, from Rachel's point of view, I was wondering, is that another dimension? Because I know, especially if it's a person, it seems that there is an opening. It's not like right now, it's more like something more like light, very light, more kind of transparent, more, but it's still very clear. That's what you see, you know, or even hear. So, I recognize the voice also. So I was wondering whether it's a play in another dimensions, and also if it's an attachment to the object. This is why it's happening. I hesitated to ask this question, and I felt a little bit of fear about it. I said, maybe I should ask.
It's spooky. Now, whether it's spooky with attachment or not, is for you to...
Well, it seemed it happened with people or animals, you know, that I really like very much.
Yes, there are things like that, but they are not really part of what we are talking about here.
Yes, I can see that. But as it was my experience, you know, I need some clarification. You
said everything is possible. You see. So.
Yeah, actually, also when I asked you the question, I thought I think I kind of know the answer.
You know, the safe attitude is, I think, is to say everything is possible, however, the odds vary. Yeah, these events are not unheard of in those cases. I have several stories, but these are just stories.
I have another question also that's bothered me. It seems, you know, this one is a little bit touchy. I look a lot of information on the internet, and I read some books. And I'm not a reader, but I was really interested, and some people said, okay, come on, you know, do you have books, because the internet is not really reliable. But sometimes I wonder what's more reliable, you know, because it seems that the world that we are living is just a dream.
You are becoming my fake news walla. Voila. Or Wally in your case, right?
But it seems that the world, the way we see it, the way we have been educated, you know, is completely wrong.
Here she goes.
Completely wrong. It's a lie from beginning to end. And for some reason, I just looked because I was interested. That's since we watched the debate. No, since we watched that here, I was, you know, all my life long, I never was interested in politics or this stuff because I never was able to see where the truth was. To me, it was weird, but then since we saw this debate, I was it was intriguing. So I've been looking on the internet and different places, books now, and it seems that there are facts, witnesses, actually a lot of witnesses to say that what we know, what we are, you know, everyone is teaching us, teachers or education, parents, everything is wrong. It seems that everything is wrong. It's all conditioned. It's all what on the... Even people who are... the elite are not the one we think they are. Everything does not seem to be what it is, what it seems that almost everyone would agree on. You know, it's not true.
Well, there is gravity, for instance. there are some
that might be
some facts, or the Earth is not flat. You know.
It might be a machine actually that runs with no energy.
Yeah, she has this theory of the flat Earth.
No, it's because the link I sent you was the flat Earth, but that was not my question. That's because it was just a link. They were talking about something else, probably the landing on the moon.
Yeah, we never landed on the moon, right?
But like the dinosaurs, we never had any. It's not true either. But there are so many things which are not true. So
You think the skeletons of dinosaurs are made of plastic?
Yes, they reconstitute them. Yes, they are not. They have never existed. And it is great that people laugh because maybe you should check first and then you will see.
But don't you think it would be known if they were made of plastic and not real bones?
They are not real bones.
I don't
dinosaur.
think this is a forum here for this kind of debates. We could do that. We could talk about that on Wednesdays evening.
Okay,
it's great
that's a
fun.
Good idea, yes. But you know, then when I read that, let's say, I heard a lot of spiritual teachers like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi when I was with the TM movement. He used to say the world is upside down. And I never understood what the meaning of it.
Well, it's relative. It depends what the up direction is.
If everything is upside down, whatever we learn or we believe it's wrong. That's the meaning of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's close this parenthesis for the time being. Yeah, Wednesday. You can come up with your arguments and bring your evidence, and we'll talk about it.
Okay, I'm swallowing my pride here. Maggie's swallowing her pride that's appearing in consciousness. There's something that I just can't seem to get clear, which is how to conduct the experiments that you've made references to in the past. And my impression of it is that we make the investigation. Through the investigation, we realize that there's no real reason to assume that the consciousness that is being experienced here is limited, by time, space, all those things. Okay, so then when I go, my big thing, everybody knows my, terrible injustice in life, my job. So when I go into that situation, though, I don't understand how to try to bring that to that situation without really looking, I feel like it's like I'm staring at this kid who's talking back to me, and I'm so thinking that should not be happening, what is it? What's the experiment there? As I'm just going, he's not real. He's not really real. This is just appearing. Is that what it is? I don't quite know how to do it. Or like you say, has the train already left the station at that point and there's no experiment?
Well, the experiment is to remind yourself that the consciousness in this kid and the consciousness in you is the same consciousness.
Just that.
You remind yourself. And once you have reminded yourself, you stay reminded up until you decide otherwise. You see, in other words, you are going to enter the relationship at that moment from a different perspective, unless you decide to change the stand you're taking. And see what happens. In other words, if you are talking to yourself, your tone will be different, your words are going to be different, your thoughts are going to be different. It doesn't mean you are not going to chastise the kid. You may. But you are going to do it from a different place.
In my mind, I'm just thinking, you can't be, because you would not be doing that if I were, it's like this whole thing of why would such opposition be appearing? But it just is. The fact is, it is. And what I'm perceiving as opposition. I don't know. Anyway, I'll reflect on that a little more and try to take it there.
And besides, it is not only the interest of this child and your own interests that have to be taken into consideration, but also the interests of all the children that are present at that moment. Yes. So, because they are consciousness too. Right. You see, so the decision you make or what you say takes everything into account. But no matter what, if you decide to take some action with this kid, it's not going to come from a place of revenge or a place, it's going to come to a place that it is in his interest, in your interest, in the interest of all of those who are present.
Mm-hmm.
So although you may, for instance, decide to tell the kid, okay, pay a visit to the principal or whatever, I don't know how you do that in this country, also, the action you take may be the same as the one that would have been taken from a personal vantage from a vantage point of separation. The outcome of it will be different for all parties involved because of the place the decision came from.
So if I can't, here's my thing. If I can't prove to myself or accept in myself that my action is not coming from the personal, then it sounds like it's very likely I should do nothing.
Yeah, but sometimes you know, things will come to you when you are from this vantage point. Words will come to you that are very efficient, and that because if someone is confrontational and comes from a vantage point of separation, sometimes you tell them, you know what, I'm not your enemy. You know, I want to be your friend. I'm not your enemy. You know, and they don't expect this kind of answer, so they are taken, you know, off guard, so to speak, and that goes deep. Even if then they still go, yeah, you are not my enemy, but I am yours. You know, but it will still have an impact, you know, a delayed impact. But what I'm saying is just an example. Perhaps that which is going to come to you in this moment will be something very different, something more confrontational in appearance. Mm-hmm. But internally, not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sometimes people need to be stopped. Sometimes what you say doesn't come. Let me tell you a story. I was in a station in France. And so I was seated waiting for a train going to the retreat in Spain. And these two old ladies arrive. They sit just in front of me. Behind them, on the wall, was a sign, no smoking. So they light up their cigarettes, you know. And as a former smoker, I hate it, you know. I cannot stand it. So I told them, if you don't mind going somewhere else to smoke, you know it's not allowed here. And they say, does that bother you? You know, like I would say that just for the purpose of moving my lips, you know. And I say, yes, actually it does, but you know, you could go over there, you know, and have the same and then the lady tells me, don't tell us where to go, you know. So I was sitting here. So they were kind of in front, and next to me there were two empty seats. Behind me there was Laura sitting, you know, these were seats, two empty seats next to me. So the ladies went, finished their cigarette, they had a little dog. They came back, you know. Oh, they did go. They went. But then they came back. So I guess they had conspired together to teach me a lesson, you know. So they had, see how I'm going get back at him. And so they came back with the dog, and they came back, and Laura also felt very strange that they would come back and just sit next to me where there were seats available in front where they used to be before. So I find that spooky. But as they pass by with the dog, the lady tells me, well, I hope the dogs don't bother you. So immediately I say, no, only old lady who smoke. Only old ladies who smoke. And it was true. Because they were old, they were ladies, and they smoked. Right? So it is a case, where I was not being politically correct, but they truly deserved it. They were asking for it. They were truly asking for it. And my feeling was like kids, playing with each other, they wanted to enter. It's like a tennis game, They wanted to play tennis with me, because they came back. They had prepared their serve, For the serve, you have all the time to toss the ball and to prepare. So they went there. They prepared their toss, And they came and blam, they served at me. So I enjoyed every moment. Then they say, "Oh, you're not a gentleman." That was the answer. And then they moved away.
So you didn't feel that was coming from any personal place?
Oh no, that came like with joy, that came with delight, and I saw it flowing back. It's like a return of serve. Plaf. I didn't have to think. There was no. It was really fun.
Okay. I'd like to turn you loose on the teenagers.
And anyway. Especially being an old gentleman, they were my age. Possibly even, they were my age. So I don't see myself as young. So they couldn't require me to see them as young, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go online. We start with the questions that are left from last time. Diego, how to differentiate between negative emotion and feeling while in the midst of agitation? Is it a necessary step to do so? Or are both just bodily sensations, and therefore we just offer all of them to the space? When we are in the midst of agitation, what you are experiencing is negative emotion. What I call feeling is a sense of me. The sense of me is the source of the agitation. The negative emotion is the effect of it. Is it a necessary step to do so, to differentiate? No, you just welcome the situation, in this case, the agitation. And by fully accepting it, it will lead you, it will reveal its origin. It may be a train of thoughts. And then this train of thoughts, in turn, may originate from a feeling of being separate. But usually it will originate from the belief to be a separate consciousness. Also, remember that when we are in the midst of agitation, it's not the best time to investigate. The best time to investigate is when we are under no pressure to do it, when we have the leisure to reflect upon this important question, what am I? How do I know that consciousness is separate? And he says, also when we explore the body, is it of any importance to distinguish between sense of me and negative emotion? Or we just see that neither of them are me? You know, it comes what you're assuming that to distinguish is something that we do as a decision. I decide to distinguish. But in fact, to distinguish is in fact a form of understanding. We don't decide to understand. We don't decide to distinguish. You don't decide to discriminate. What we can decide is to contemplate. And it is the outcome of this contemplation will be the understanding, the discrimination, but it will be the outcome. That which is in our power is to begin to welcome the totality of the situation, meaning thoughts, bodily sensations, sense perceptions. And there is no difference between the most, it is not important, in fact, to distinguish between the sense of me and negative emotion. Whatever appears, appears. The distinction which is important is between consciousness, that to which both sense of me and negative emotions appear, and that which appears. So that's the only important distinction. And this distinction also doesn't come as a decision, but is a result of this contemplation, of this welcoming. Diego again. Last retreat in Barcelona, I realized very clearly that all the efforts I make during the day in order to protect this I, if my girlfriend leaves me, I will be miserable. If my parents don't love me, I will be left alone and die. If I don't have money, I will eventually die. If people think I am a jerk, they won't love me and I will be miserable. I realize how most of my activities and energy seem to be directed towards the protection of this separate dictator from both dying and an existence of misery. But in fact, I realized it is true that in the end, this little dictator will die, and there is no strategy that will change this fact. Days later, this realization gave me a lot of anxiety, a loss of hope, because there is no way around the fact what I believe to be will die. Is that loss of hope a good thing? That loss of hope is a sign that you identify with that which is going to die. So, in that sense, identification is not a good thing. On the other hand, to see to a certain extent things the way they are is always a progress. In other words, if I identify with this body believing that it is eternal, the realization that it is not eternal is a progress, because it is the liberation from a lie I was entertaining. But it is not sufficient, of course, as long as I identify with this body. Sophie. It's in French, it's long, and I have to translate it in English. I know there is consciousness or awareness. I know I am this consciousness or awareness through the sense of being. I know that the sense of being is the most intimate experience I have of myself. The most intimate, meaning the closest, without distance. Therefore, more intimate than the experience of the body, which I have through the bodily sensations, more intimate than the experience of the mind, which I have through the thoughts, and more intimate than the experience of the world, which I have through the sense perceptions. And today, I have to acknowledge that everything, all of that which is perceived on an equal footing through by this consciousness that I know myself to be. Nevertheless, I believe, I have the feeling that this sense of being is itself an object, but much more subtle, much more intangible, but nevertheless still an object. And I fear that this new identification with this sensation, identification with this sensation of being a consciousness. No, and I feel that this new identification with this sense of being, instead of the old identification with the body and the mind, doesn't liberate me. And moreover, since I've never had an ecstatic experience of oneness, I cannot refer myself to it to eliminate this doubt relating to this sense of being a consciousness, but a limited one. Also, I know that I have no conclusive evidence that my consciousness is limited, since I know that the only convincing evidence would be the presence of another consciousness, of a higher consciousness, which would experience the appearance and the disappearance of that which I call my consciousness. And while writing this, the thought comes to me that yes, finally, such a consciousness, this ultimate reality of which you speak, can and theoretically must exist. But in this case, there is still the possibility also that I, sense of being, would appear in it, and therefore the impression that remains but in this case it's possible that I, sense of being, would appear in it, and therefore I'm still under the impression and therefore the impression that remains is that I'm not completely it. I am like a fruit created by it, made out of it, but I'm not sharing its unlimited nature, which sends me back to a limited, time-limited sensation of existence. It is as if I would desire to get tangible proof of the unlimited nature of my consciousness in order to accept, to renounce the old belief in separation. To put it in a nutshell, as you can see, I'm still in the mud. Can you clarify for me and give me a means to conduct my investigation to get out of this labyrinth? You say labyrinth? You have to, you're on the right track in your investigation, your philosophical investigation. You have to come to grip with this problem of two consciousnesses. One that would be yours, limited, and the other, unlimited, watching the limited one. But that which is watched doesn't watch. That which is watched cannot watch. There are no two watchers in us. There is only one watcher. And you have to meditate, to reflect upon this fundamental question. To watch or to be watched? That is the question. That is the real question. To watch or to be watched? Am I watching or am I something which is watched? Am I seeing or am I something which is seen? The problem is that we attribute seeing to objects, to the eye, to the body. We attribute perceiving to object, to the brain, to the body. But in fact, that which sees is never seen. That which perceives is never perceived. So this attribution of perceiving to object is an absolute religious leap of faith, totally devoid of supporting evidence. But on the other hand, we don't have to go further than that because we don't need evidence. We know that we are the watcher. That there is a watcher is beyond any question. Matthew, I'm open to this possibility that we are not a separate entity. However, I need to be somebody to deal effectively with all the challenges of life and to deal with people for whom I am somebody. Can you tell me if this paradox can be solved? Of course. Let me give you a metaphor. Let's take someone who is a cop as a profession. I mean, does this cop as a profession, when he comes home, is still a cop with his children, with his wife? Or does he become a husband, a father, a friend? You see what I mean? Does he interrogate them? Does he arrest them? Does he whatever? Fine them? You see? In other words, when the cop is not his real identity, his real identity is love. And there are moments in life he needs to be a cop. So then he put his hat and then stop the guy who is speeding and gives him a ticket. But he doesn't identify, hopefully, with being a cop. Otherwise, I mean, the life of his wife and children must be miserable. Can you imagine? No. So it's the same here. You see? Take my metaphor. Being a loving husband, a loving father, being love itself, that would be in my metaphor, being universal consciousness. And then, when required, being a cop means being a man, a woman, a doctor, a cook, whatever our profession is. Being a father, being a son, a daughter, etc. In other words, we don't have problems, really, putting all kinds of hats during our daily activities. So, it's the same here. We keep wearing all kinds of caps, knowing that our real identity is capless. Consciousness is capless. All of that, all of these questions get answered here theoretically, but usually they get answered in the traditional teaching by hanging out with a human teacher. Then you see the human teacher playing all these roles that society and life require us to play without being identified with those. And then we take it from there and we just play our lives in the same manner. It's not difficult. Dory, please help me dispel this persistent doubt. If the reality that is hearing these words right now is omnipotent, all-pervasive, and autonomous, why is it that it stops hearing these words when the body leaves the place? It stops hearing these words through this body because this body has left the place. I don't see where the problem is. It is omnipotent, and therefore it has the power to keep this body in the place or to remove this body from the place. It has the power to hear the words without the body being in the place also. She goes on, there is a correlation between the reality and the body, it seems, because if it were independent, no interruption in hearing these words right now would occur. I guess when the body leaves the place. You see, it is true that there is a correlation between the reality and the body, but it is a one-way correlation in that sense that the body depends on the reality for its very existence, but the converse is not true. The reality doesn't depend upon the body. So, the reality of the body and the body are not independent, but whenever reality chooses to stop listening to that body, it can do so. Because the body and whatever the body does is dependent upon this reality. By the way, the body can be present also, and consciousness may choose to stop listening to this body. It happens quite often. Number 2. Before, Dory, I don't really see the pertinence of your argument. I don't see the problem. The fact that the reality is omnipotent, all-pervasive, and autonomous doesn't compel it to keep listening to these words through that body. It is free, therefore it is not compelled. It's not compellable. Number 2, please clarify these words, concept and projection. How does a mind conceptualize and how does it project? I'm looking towards an object, for instance, a sunset. How does conceptualization occur? And how does projection take place? I don't know, Dory, because I rarely use the word project or the word conceptualize. But I may have used them. And I use the word mind with 2 different meanings. One restricted meaning and one more general meaning. The restricted meaning of mind refers to the subjective sphere of perception, which is mostly thoughts. This part of our perception which we cannot really share, which is not shared by others. But even that, when we say to conceptualize, it refers to the thought aspect of mind. The general definition of mind is the totality of our perception, because all of our perceptions are subjective. Our thoughts are subjective. Our bodily sensations are subjective. That's obvious. However, even our sense perception, what hearing, smelling, seeing, are subjective. Not two minds, two different minds see two different images of the same object. So the perceptions are subjective. They are not really shared. So that was necessary to clarify the word conceptualize. So conceptualize refers to some kind of thought that has a reference that is supposed to exist in parallel to this thought. For instance, the concept table and the object table in the world. In other words, we take two objects, one which is a thought, the other which is perceived through our senses. So the conceptualization process establishes a one-on-one or a one-to-one correspondence between a series of objects, actually gross or subtle. They don't need to be gross like the table, because they could be other thoughts. And the concept, which are thoughts. So you have a realm of concepts, and you have a realm of reference. So the conceptualization process is, if you will, a labeling process, which to each referent associates a concept or a thought to the word table. But a concept can be associated to another concept. Example, the notion of concept, or the concept of notion. Think about those. In the concept of notion, right? Concept, notion is a referent, and concept is a concept. So that's what I would define conceptualization, and that's how mind conceptualizes. Now, what is usually understood as projection in spiritual circles, and I don't use this word often, and I will explain why I don't use it often, is this notion, it comes from this notion that the world out there doesn't have real existence independently from mind, and that its sole reality is what we perceive of it. And therefore, just like the images on the movie screen are not real, but they are a projection of the picture which is on the film onto the screen, this world, according to this perspective, is simply a projection of the mind. So that's projection, as I understand it, as people. So to give you, to take the case in point as you suggest, if I am looking towards an object, example, a sunset, how does conceptualization occur? When? For instance, when I say, oh, what a beautiful sunset, I put a label, beautiful sunset, on the direct perception I am experiencing. That's conceptualization. How does projection take place? It would mean that the sun and all the elements of the landscape don't exist independently from this mind, just as what happens during the night dream. In the night dream, the world we see, when we wake up, we realize that it was only made of the perceptions we had of it. But it didn't exist in any physical space whatsoever. Its only reality was the mind that was projecting it. Now, why don't I use this projection terminology? It's because it assumes that the world out there exists only in minds. And I find that to be limiting. I would agree that the world out there is a projection of consciousness. That, yes, it's a creation of consciousness. As consciousness conceives it, it projects it, it creates it. Conception, creation, and projection are simultaneous, they are undistinguishable from the vantage point of consciousness, but not from the vantage point of mind, and that's where the ambiguity comes from. Michael, thank you, that was great, but not quite what I was on about. What does it mean to identify? What is being invested or investigated, I guess, right now? Well, what it means to identify means to believe that I, consciousness, that which is hearing these words in this moment, the reality which is hearing these words in this moment, is an object, something that can be defined, that can be perceived, that can be known, and usually the object with which we identify, at least in this culture, is a human body. So, identification means the belief that I, consciousness, am dependent upon the product of a human body. Now, in other culture, it means to believe that I, consciousness, am a limited object, because only objects can be limited. A limited object called a soul, which evolves in time, which suffers, which is subjected to all kinds of accidents. So that's what I mean to identify. How can I find out whether I am identifying or not? It's very simple. I ask myself the question, what do I believe to be? If I believe to be a man or a woman, I am identified. That's very simple. That's very simple. Yamil. I have seasons, 5 days or so, I like the word season, of happiness and peace, feeling and understanding all you say. But there are days like these, with a deep sense of lack and not knowing what to do. And as you say, I will not fall again on boring practices. I try to investigate, but the fear still takes me. And I found it difficult in communicating and being with my wife. The thought of losing our relationship triggers the fear. I live in Argentina. I listen to your audios all day. I really want to follow this path. But please advise how to go on. I'm doing some dynamic meditations for the body, but I don't know how to do the body work you comment on. The body work that I would recommend is this. It's very simple. If it is true that consciousness is universal, it follows immediately from that our true body is the universe. Okay? If it is true that consciousness is universal, the implication, the consequence, is that our true body is the universe. Chances are we don't perceive, without going too far, our immediate surroundings as being our body. Somehow we have drawn a line in the sand, not in the sand actually, at the surface of the skin, that separates our body from its immediate surroundings. The goal of the yoga is to see that this separation is completely artificial, in fact, non-existent in reality. But this investigation cannot be undertaken on the level of concepts, on the level of thought. It has to be undertaken on the level of bodily sensations and sense perception. For instance, in the room where you sit, the object that surrounds you start making a kind of deliberate attempt to see them no differently from your hands or your feet, like an extensions of your body. Because if it is true that consciousness is universal, we should perceive along these new patterns of perception. So if you make deliberate effort, no matter how artificial they seem to be in the beginning, no matter how childish they seem to be, they will realign the way you perceive your surroundings with the truth. In that sense, you are conducting an experiment on the truth of universal consciousness. And you'll see that if you feel that your body is in seamless continuity with the surrounding universe, it is not an impediment in your daily life. Quite the contrary. It makes everything smooth and easy. And it doesn't mean you don't bump into physical objects. Because after all, you can bump into your own body. They claim that the sound is not available. Well, remember, we are broadcasting on 2 different channels, so perhaps if one is not working, the other one is. Tom, I live in a small Iowa town, I guess Fairfield, right? With many long-time devotees of Maharishi, yeah, here you go. Mahesh Yogi is the founder of a meditation technique called TM, or Transcendental Meditation. I personally know many who have been practicing TM for 50 years, and yet still seem to be searching for truth or not. Some even feel TM is fake and are resentful. Why has it not brought discovery of truth after 50 years, do you think? And if it's not too much, what is the essence or goal of your path? I will start with the last question. The essence of goal, not of my path, but of the path of all human beings, is happiness. If there is one thing that human beings seek, is happiness. They all do that. Even the one who claims they seek misery, they just are sadistic, masochists who seek happiness through misery. So everybody seeks happiness in their life. So that's the most common goal. It's just that most of us, we don't seek it where it can be found. That's the only difference. So the goal of the path is happiness. And it is causeless happiness or joy. In other words, a happiness that is not based upon what we have, but about what we are. What we have, we can lose it. What we are, we never lose it. That's why this happiness is causeless, because not based upon what we have, and also it is inalienable. It cannot be taken from us, because it is grounded in what we are. Why has it not brought discovery of truth after 50 years, do you think, about TM? I cannot comment on other teachers or other teachings. I don't know. I've not practiced TM myself. So I cannot have an informed opinion on that. But I'm going to make a comment. I mean, if you practice for 50 years something without making progress, you're really stupid. I mean, it's like, let's assume I want to learn a musical instrument, right? And I've practiced it for 5 years, and I still cannot play the national anthem. And what are the odds that I'm going to give a recital at Carnegie Hall down the road? You see, I should either change instrument or change teachers. I don't know, but so in other words, if you are sticking to a teaching and or a teacher, you should see at some point that the trajectory of your life has changed and that you are moving towards happiness. In other words, that's where the question politician asks, are you better off that you were 4 years ago truly applies? You know, am I better off than I was 4 years ago? I mean, I may still be miserable, but am I less miserable than I used to be? That's the question, you see. That's a very important question. Why persist if I'm worse off. Because the beauty of being on the path, having found the path, is that the answer will be yes. Whereas in most people, as they get older, they get more miserable. So it's certainly a good sign if, as you get older, you get happier. You see, it means that some inversion, some miraculous process has taken place. But if after 5 years, you're just more miserable, I mean, that's a bad investment. Also, even I would add this, the first time you go to a teacher or to a teaching, I mean, there is a difference. That should generate in you more eagerness. More eagerness. Eagerness to do the homework of the teaching, the investigation, but also to be happy to come and see your teacher and to when I was visiting my teacher after 1 or 2 years, really I was not after what the teaching was. The teaching was not in the words. I was just going on a vacation with him, and I never felt that it was like a chore, like it was, that I had to go there. I'd rather go on a ski vacation than spend this week with my teacher. That was just the opposite. I used to ski before I stopped skiing to be with my teacher, not because I preferred that than skiing, although I loved skiing. Okay, Tom. Last week you said Hatha Yoga wasn't needed and implied it was forcing. And yet I have heard you say that you use it in your sessions. What did I say about Hatha Yoga last week? I don't remember. Yes, the Hatha Yoga we use here is the real Hatha Yoga. Most of the Hatha Yoga you will find is gymnastic. In other words, it's fake Hatha Yoga. Also, do you consider, or is it your experience, that spiritually separate from the world we all live in? No, the world, no. The world is that which provides us with those beautiful yoga exercises. So the world is our yoga teacher. Cody, is the concept of the body, i.e., composed of parts, hands, feet, eyes, to be used as merely a pedagogical step for feeling the energy body and then to be discarded totally? Well, we have to define first what the energy body is. The energy body is the sum of our bodily sensations. What is interesting to experience is that this energy body, although in the usual sense, it coincides with the physical body, or seems to, in fact, has independence. Let me explain that. I can have my hands and my arms on my lap, but with the sensation I can be like this. When we visit a museum, and we look at a sculpture, and let's say it's a marble sculpture, and there are parts of the sculpture which are very polished, shiny, and other parts which are more different texture, more coarse. When we look at it, we don't look at it with our eyes only, but with our hands, we feel the temperature, we feel the texture of the sculpture. So we are at a distance. We are in a museum. It's not allowed to touch, right? So, but nevertheless, with this tactile or body of energy, we touch it. So just small introduction to the body of energy. So to feel the energy body, you can do simple exercise. For instance, this exercise to dissociate the energy body from the physical body. Your arms are here, and you feel that you're here or here. Then you can play with it because this body of energy has no limitations, in fact, in space. It can do all kinds of things. And that's interesting. Why do we play with that? Because, as I was mentioning earlier, when we realign the way we experience the body with the possibilities that consciousness is universal. In other words, when we experience the world as being our body, this freedom and this dissociation of the body of energy from the physical body appears as a byproduct of this realignment. So taking it the other way around, by making a deliberate effort, so to speak, to dissociate the body of energy from the physical body, it facilitates the dissolution of the sense of separation between the physical body and the surrounding universe. Nancy. At the June retreat in New York, you said, feel/understand/experience. And I think the point was that all were required. All the above were required. I wonder if you could say something about this, especially about the feel part. During the retreat, I had the experience of feeling that I was consciousness, something I already understood and had experienced. I don't know what other word to use. Feeling that I was it deepens the whole thing. I wonder if this is what you meant. If it deepens the whole thing, it is what I meant. There is in this succession of words, feel, understand, experience, I could add more, such as feel, understand, experience, perceive, even think. Feel, understand, experience, perceive, think. There is a common denominator to all of these. So to use this multiplicity of words, in fact, by this juxtaposition of those, points to that which they have in common, which is the experience of consciousness. And it is important to see that they are not independent. For instance, we cannot understand without experiencing. But experiencing is also a form of understanding. And the same for the other expressions. So by using different words like that, we kind of widen the scope. We move beyond the limitations. So that would be my comment. And apparently in your case, you went beyond the limitations that you were kind of still superimposing on your experience. Galen, from the perspective of the Absolute, I know there is only being, and there is this deep interest, joy, and longing to be in truth, beauty, and love for me. However, from the limited, finite self, would you recommend following a certain path, such as jnana, which I have read is the most stabilizing and direct, or bhakti, raja, karma, zen, etc., in order to develop wisdom and understanding of mind and to cultivate the tendencies and patterns of the separate self? Can I mix them? The path we follow is less important than the teacher we follow. The path without the teacher is dead. The path without a teacher becomes a religion. That's what religions are. Religions are paths that have lost the teacher. When there is a lineage of teachers, it is not religion. It is living and vibrant philosophy. It is not the same. The goal of philosophy is to liberate oneself from the fear of death through the use of reason. It's a beautiful definition. So that's what it is about, not about beliefs. So the teacher has to give you a glimpse of the happiness and peace you seek, which has no cause, which is independent from all objects. And then also, it has to guide you through this journey like a guide like the guide who guides a mountain climber to the summit of the mountain. It is recommended in this case that the guide who guides a mountain climber has already been to the summit. That could be kind of a prerequisite. So the rest are just words. Bhakti, Raja, Karma, Zen. Just try to find a teacher which speaks to your heart, to your intelligence, and to your sense of beauty. Your allegiance is with truth, love, and beauty, not with a person of a teacher. So that's the most important. Otherwise, it is like if you want to learn how to play the violin, and you buy a book about how to play the violin. You have never seen anybody playing the violin or never heard what a violin sounds like. Can you imagine under this condition? Chances are, again, you are not going to play at Carnegie Hall. It's the same here. Instead of buying the book, it would be better to find a good violinist who initiates you to the art of playing the violin. Okay, she goes on. I've been experiencing this dissolution of self suddenly and spontaneously only from listening, watching teachers, reading, and observing, witnessing reflected on phenomena in the present and past. It seems that there is some sort of stabilization, grounding, centering missing in the body or mind. I don't want to get lost on the path to truth. Yes, my recommendation would be to find a teacher who can take you there. If your goal is to be stable, find a teacher who is stable in happiness. Only a guide who has been there can guide you there. That would be my advice. Andrew, I'm curious about the difference between the sense of I am or beingness and the absolute. Certain teachers have talked about how after sitting in the I am for a long time, it finally dissolves, leaving the absolute. What is the difference between the feeling of beingness and the absolute? The feeling is an object. The absolute is a reality that perceives it. That's the difference. And does this practice of sitting in the I am actually work, or is it a waste of time? You know, there is ambiguity in the practice of sitting in the I am, because it can mean two things. It can mean focusing on the sense I am, or on the thought I am, or just abiding in our true I amness, in our true beingness, effortlessly, spontaneously. So, in the first case, it is a practice. In the second case, it is not a practice, it is just being. The practice in the first case has to be an investigation, not a repetition. The difference is that a repetition is a closed process, whereas an investigation is an open process. An example of a closed process is if I repeat Coca-Cola, 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 or I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. These are just words. If I don't try to find out the meaning of the words, if I have the question, I am Shiva, what does that mean? Then there is an openness. You see? Then the investigation begins. Because in order to try to understand what it means, I am Shiva, well, usually I think I am Devadatta, I am Francis, I am Andrew. Then, in order to try to ask the question, what does it mean I am Shiva? I have to distance myself from the usual belief I am Andrew. So then it's an open investigation. So don't practice, investigate, or your practice has to be always open. Otherwise, it is a waste of time. I sometimes do this practice, he goes on, and it feels quite peaceful, but when I return to daily living, the old feelings of separation, negative thoughts return. Does it actually dissolve the ego or just put it on pause to return with full force when the practice is over? Yes. That's a problem with some practice, because some practice just don't try. The goal of some practice is just to give the ego, or the ignorance, in fact, the opportunity to go on a siesta. The problem is that siestas, even in Mexico, they are short-lived. Then ignorance wakes up. It depends what you want. If you want a peaceful state, then the ignorance siesta practice may work. But if we want to be established in a natural way, that's different. I take one more question by Galen, and the other questions next week, next Sunday, I guess. Galen, can you go into explaining the stages / truth / wisdom and practices on a bodily level that led to your direct experience of the truth that consciousness is formless, ever present, and is the substance that forms all things and is the background controller of the whole show dream world? Well, if I answer this question, it will be very, very limited, because it will be what happened in the case of Francis. It may not be what happens. It's certainly not what happens in the case of Galen. So I don't know how that would be really useful. Because there might be cases in which it happens in ways that are not that common. And there are other cases that are more common. So if I give a personal account of that, and if in Francis' cases it was one of these uncommon, strange events, then everybody is going to think that, well, it should happen the same way in my case. It does not happen, therefore I am cooked. Or I should do whatever Francis was doing for me, for it to happen to me, and it won't happen. So I'd rather not go into this, because it would be a disservice to those who are listening. In most cases, it will happen incrementally once you have found your teacher. In the presence of a teacher, you will feel that you are at some point convergent toward happiness, and that your life has taken a turn for the better. That's all. Then she goes on, I'm experiencing real glimpses of this, but it is unstable, and fear, apathy, disorientation arises. I've been told it is important to fully meet these emotions as they arise, and to build a relationship of trust and refuge is this new way of being in order to have a new understanding or understanding of how to navigate from the vantage point of consciousness and not a separate transient sense of self. Yeah, the best advice I would give is, find your teacher and allow your teacher to help you out. The function of the teacher is double. And one is to initiate the process by giving you a glimpse of your true nature. And the second is to take you on the path towards stabilization. So sometimes there are two gurus in one's life. One that gives you the first glimpse and another one that takes you through the process of stabilization. I had this friend of mine, he was a disciple of Ramana Maharshi, but he met Ramana Maharshi 3 months before Ramana Maharshi passed away. So he had, of course, a glimpse of truth in the presence of Ramana Maharshi. But when Ramana Maharshi passed away, he was not stable in happiness. So he went to another teacher, Sri Atmananda, Krishna Menon, to finish the job. So this teacher was what they call in India his Karana Guru. Karana Guru is the one who finishes the job. It's like when you build a house. You have the foundation and then you have the finishing carpentry. So that's the advice I would give. Find the teacher with whom you resonate the most, no matter what the other conditions are. The tendency is to find a lousy teacher near home. It's better to find a good teacher far away, even if you don't meet him or her often. It's a question of quality more than a question of quantity. So with this,